What's up, everyone? Today's guest is Mike da Fonte. He is a former professional soccer player. He is the owner of Fonte Pro Training, and he's a real estate investor. In this podcast, we're talking about professional soccer, real estate investing, and entrepreneurship. I'm Jake Garay from the Garay-Mashaw team with Berkshire Hathaway, and you're listening to my podcast, Selling the Suburbs. I'm sitting down with real estate agents, investors, experts, and various professionals throughout the industry. On Selling the Suburbs, we're discussing the truth about real estate, entrepreneurship, and the ever-changing housing market. To start out, kind of just tell us like your story for everybody who doesn't know your background. Obviously, you've done a bunch of different stuff. Now you own a coaching business, soccer coaching business. Talk us through how you went from professional soccer player to owning your own business, buying investment property. Like, where did it start out?
So when I was playing, I kind of knew that like this wasn't going to last forever, and I needed what was I going to do afterwards. So I started to research like on my free time, like housing and rentals and all this stuff. But like I wasn't that serious about it. I had some notes. I still have the book to this day. I still have some notes, but it like got me interested to where I was like, I know I need to save my money. So guys were going out to like the clubs and blowing their like paychecks, and I was like, no, I need to save that. So I was keeping everything in the bank. And then I'd come home for the off season, like on maybe my last year, and I started like looking at like actually trying to buy. And I remember I went on Google and I typed in like Dutchess County, like best real estate agent, and I found Blake, and then Blake put me in touch with you. And then we had gone out to see a couple houses, but I always knew I wanted to get involved in it. So I had done so much research beforehand, and I was like looking into stuff, and I was looking in Westchester, and I knew that I just couldn't afford it. So then I started like looking on Zillow, and I saw the prices were a bit cheaper up in Dutchess. That's why I started reaching out to them. Then me and you obviously went and saw a bunch of houses, and I knew I was like on it. Like I was like hot with it. And I knew that I didn't want to keep playing anymore because it just got to be a lot. And I knew that like I was starting this coaching company and I had a little bit of money that I wanted to do something with, but I knew that I also didn't show enough income to be able to qualify for a house by myself. So I got my sister, convinced her to get on board with me. And that's how we got that first house. But I remember we looked at a whole bunch beforehand.
Yep. And this was all pre-COVID, pre-pandemic.
And I literally got that first house, and I got this indoor facility, I want to say within a month of each other.
Wow.
And like that was huge for me because once I finished playing, I want to say like there was like about like a 9-month period between when I stopped playing to all this happened. But I remember like I stopped playing, or I kind of realized I wanted to stop playing, and I was still kind of in and out of it, but I started getting a lot more kids to like coach. And then I started growing, and I was like, I need to find an indoor space because in the winter I lose all these kids. And I was able to I was renting a Zumba room for $25 an hour. That was like a quarter of this, if that. And then eventually we were able to get this, but I had to be persistent. Like I'm a very persistent person. Like I'm going to figure it out some way. So I remember someone had showed me this place, and we were talking to the landlord, and they were kind of like, nah, they're like, nope. So I was super upset about it. But then I like emailed the guy like 30 times. I like knocked on his door when I had to. And he was like, all right, if you do 6 months down, like we'll do it. And I was like, great, I'm done. Yeah, 6 months, we'll do it. And we got in here, and I was like, oh man, like, how am I going to fill up my days? Like, am I able to even afford the rent? Like, because I had kids, but it wasn't that many where like every day was full. It was maybe an hour this day, 2 hours that day, and to the point now where I'm like, every single day.
Now you've outgrown the space.
Yeah, there's 2 groups, and it's 4 to 8 p.m., me and another trainer all the time switching back and forth. So it's gotten like crazy, but if I didn't do that, it's never would have occurred. I would have lost
where you are today.
Yeah, I never would have.
So like, can you talk a little bit about the business of soccer? Like in terms of when you were playing, where did you play? I know you played here in the States, you played overseas. Cause I think people think of like professional sports, and they think of like us Americans totally clueless to how things are done in other countries and things. Like, how does that work? Because you played with a bunch of different teams in the MLS. I know that you said you played overseas as well. Like, how did you even, like, where was your first start as like a professional soccer player? Like, where did you go?
Oh, man, so I had like a really bad agent at first, but I was in college. And so he even like, I was supposed to go to like bigger D1 schools, but he kind of wanted me to not. So I would still come back and play with his like club team, like a U18 team. So I was doing that, and he's making me transfer schools. And eventually I transferred 2 times. And then you can transfer from one D1 to another, but then you can't do it again without sitting out a year. So I had to go to an NAIA school. And then I did a semester there, and I dropped out. And I was like, this is not for me. I'm done with this. I want to play. And I was trying to go to tryouts all over the place, and nothing was
For
working.
professional teams?
Yeah, professional soccer, yeah. And nothing was working because if you didn't make it in the MLS, and I had just I transferred, I wasn't like at big schools, and I was just at NAI, you weren't going to get drafted, you weren't going to get pulled in. Like I was trying to go to the tryouts, but you weren't going to make it.
Yeah, most of their players are coming from the draft and things like that in school.
So it wasn't going to happen for me. So even the second division in America, there was maybe 10 teams, and it was going to be impossible to even get in there. So I knew that like I might have to leave, but I wasn't even thinking about that, honestly. It was just me playing as much as possible. So I remember I went to a random like semi-pro tryout at this team in New Rochelle, and I saw who was on the team, who wasn't, and I saw that the team needed like a right back. I never played right back before, but I was like, you know what? Like if that helps my chances, I'll do it. So I go play right back, and my first agent is there and sees me and starts talking to me while I'm playing, and he's like, I like you. Like I'm think like maybe you can go to like Portugal. And I had just got my Portuguese citizenship like maybe 2 months before. So it's funny how like everything fell in. And then 3 months before that, or 3 months after that, he took me to Portugal, and I was able to sign my first professional contract.
Wow. So so you go to Portugal, and then like, what does that look like? Because obviously you said you knew you didn't want to do it forever at the end of your career, but obviously at that point you're excited, you're trying to go everywhere. So like, you go from Portugal, where do you go? How long are you in Portugal, and then where do you go next?
So my first year I did really well, and I played almost every single game for the team when I signed. And then the next year I came back to America. Like I think we had like a 1 month off season. I go back and I went to a second division team.
So are these like 1 year contracts, like one season? It's always just like here, and then every year you're kind of just like.
Well, it's also because I didn't have like the name or anything. So no, like I was a first time guy. Like they were just like, let's see what happens.
Take a chance on you and see how it goes.
And so like my second year I went to preseason with a second division team, and I think they just kind of like played my agent a little bit and had me sign with their second team, which is in the third division again in Portugal. So I did that. You don't make a lot of money. I was literally paying for my flight there and back at the end of the season. That's what like my money the entire season was going towards. But luckily we had like a free apartment, and you had a restaurant to eat at. So like it wasn't that big of a deal. I was just happy to be playing. But I came back again after the second season, and I would go to my agent. I was like, you talk to any teams in the first or second division? He goes, yeah, but they're not really interested. So I'm going to have to send you to another third division team and have people come watch you. I go, nope, that's not happening. Like, I'm not doing that again. Because one, I don't see my family for an entire year. And like, two, like I'm missing out on these things, and I'm not making that much money anyway. Like it wasn't worth it. So I didn't have a team for like 9 months, and I was playing anywhere and everywhere. And that's when I started being like, I just dropped out of college like 2 years ago. I don't have any degree. I started coaching a little bit. I was playing for teams in the city. Like I was coming home with like $300 in my pocket at like 1 a.m. on the train, playing in like the Bronx or like Brooklyn and stuff. Like it was crazy. But luckily I was training with this team in New Jersey, and we were supposed to go like on a tour of China, and I got a 10-year visa to China. And then like literally the day before about to leave, the director calls me and is like, hey, that's not happening anymore. And I was like, good, I didn't want to go. But the coach calls me right afterwards. It's like, hey, you're too good to play here. Like I know the coach at New York Red Bulls. They're about to have like a reserve team. I'm going to get you a tryout there. So I didn't think anything. I was like, all right, cool. So like a week goes by. He calls me one day. It's like 2:00. He's like, hey, what are you doing? And I was like, just hanging out. Like, what's up? And he goes, can you get down to New Jersey in an hour? And I go, I'll figure it out. So I call my mom. I go, can I borrow your van to get down there? Because I didn't have a car. And I went down there for a week. And at the end of the week, the coach was like, I like you. I want to sign you. And I was like, crazy. And that's where it started for me in America.
That's wild. So you literally were just like trying to figure things out for 9 months. And then all of a sudden we're just like called by the Red Bulls, and then boom.
It's funny because like I have the Facebook memories, and a year. So I was able to play against Chelsea when I played for Red Bulls, but almost a year to the day, I had gone to a Red Bulls game the year before. And I remember I was waiting outside the stadium to ask the head coach if I could get a tryout.
Wow.
It was insane. Yeah. And then the next year, a year later, I'm actually playing in the stadium against like one of the best teams in the world.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it was wild.
That's really cool. So how many years did you play in the MLS?
So when I was at Red Bulls, it was the USL, so that didn't count. Then I went to Sacramento, which is also the USL, but then I went to Colorado the year after, and that was an MLS then. Then the year after, I had like a two-year contract with them, or 3, I forget. And then, but they changed coaches, and I was the first coach's player, and he left, so the director didn't want.
They bring in their own people.
Yeah, exactly. And they were like, listen, you can either terminate your contract or you can go on loan to Phoenix. So I was like, I'm going to go to Phoenix. And so in the MLS, I was for like 1 year, but then I played professionally for like 8 years with like lower divisions.
Okay. And I don't like, for people who don't understand that, like the loaning thing, how does that work? So you're with a team and they send you to another team.
Yeah. So like they pay your contract.
The team that they send you to.
No, the team that you're like signed to and they loan you, like they're still paying your contract, but they probably want you to get more games or whatever.
So it's like a developmental thing in a lot of ways.
Pretty much, yeah. Or they just want you out somehow and they don't want you around the team, whatever it is, but they pay your contract and they send you to someone else.
Interesting.
Or that team that you get loaned to might be paying part of your salary too. That's why they do it, to get you off your books.
Gotcha. So it could be like a salary cap.
Yeah,
type of thing.
exactly. Or just to get you away, don't terminate contracts and get lawyers involved and stuff.
Interesting. Yeah. So like while you're playing professional soccer, like what does that look like financially? Like, are you making good money? I know that, you said at the end, you were like, I don't want to do this anymore. You had some money saved. You started your own business. Like, was it lucrative? Did you enjoy it?
So in the beginning, it was, my first team, I didn't get paid for 6 months and I was making 250 euros a month.
Oh my God.
My second year, I got paid all the time, but it was like 350 euros a month. Then when I came back to America, I was making okay money. Like it was much better. Like I think my first contract was like $1,600 a month, but I got to live at home and I was doing a little bit of coaching. So I was able to make extra money. Then every year it like incrementally went up for me because I did better and did better. Right. And then eventually when I was in MLS and then I was at Phoenix, like I was making really good money. And then like obviously some stuff happened where I had to go to OKC and I had to take some pay cuts and stuff. But then at that point I started like doing my coaching and I was like, wait a second, like I don't have to deal with like politics and like getting screwed over by coaches and agents and all this stuff. And I can make more money. Like, why would I continue to put myself through this when I can't see my family, my friends, all that? So I was like, maybe it's time to start doing this stuff.
So that's when you were kind of beginning that transition.
Yeah.
And did you always know, like, when I'm done playing professionally, I want to like start my own coaching business?
I always knew, like, when I dropped out of college, I remember I went up to a kid at a field, me and my brother, and went to the dad and we're like, hey, do you want us to train your son? And I was like, I played in Portugal, just after I come back to Portugal, I was like, played for Portugal for 2 years. And he goes, sure, how much? And I was like, I don't know, like $30.
How much you want to pay me?
Yeah, like, what do you think I'm worth? I don't know. But it started there, and then we started to grow kids. But I would leave, me and him, my brother would leave for preseason, have a couple kids, leave for a year, come back, have a couple kids. But then it got to a point where I kind of realized that like that could go full time. And I saw other people doing it online too. And I had worked with one of like the best trainers in the whole world, a guy from Australia. And I saw that like me and him were talking about it one time. And I saw like what he was making and what he had done. I was like, I can definitely do that. Like, I know I can do that. I also have the knowledge. I played at places. Like I can definitely do this. So as I started to play more, when I come home for the off season, my price would go up for individual sessions. And I started getting a couple more kids. And I was like, I think I could definitely maintain this. And then I think that's where they got to the point where I was like, I was getting like screwed over by this team or that agent or whatever. And I was like, this isn't fun for me anymore, but I enjoy teaching the kids. And I know I can get more and more kids all the time.
So you kind of, stop playing, you start the company. When you were looking at a facility, because you kind of alluded to it earlier with, you started looking for places to rent and kind of expand. It's interesting because you're getting into like the commercial real estate sector, right? Like, how did you determine like what was going to be a good place to have your business? Like, what were the factors that you like took into consideration?
Oh man, well, I feel like you manifest things. So I wanted it so bad. I literally was about to like get $1 million loan from Wells Fargo and I was trying to build my own indoor facility. Like I was trying to like subdivide land that's right across the street. And like I had made this business proposal. I went in front of like this board. And literally this fell into my lap. And I was like, this is like perfect. I've been looking everywhere because I didn't want to be at the field anymore. Me and my brother were over there at rain, shine, snow. We were training the kids. But eventually parents don't want their kids in 30-degree weather in the rain and stuff.
You're beholden to the elements.
Exactly. So I could make a lot of money in the summer, but all of a sudden I can't in the fall and winter. And I don't want to be able to not support myself. So I knew I needed just a decent sized facility where I could like get a couple kids. And my brother could have a couple kids, or another trainer could have a couple of kids. And I knew that we just did a Zumba room. Like me and my brother were in a Zumba room training. I had a group, he had a group, or individuals or whatever. And it was very, very small. So I knew that anything a little bit bigger than that would work for us, as long as financially, like I think we could do it. And once we did the Zumba room, I kind of like, I always kept our books. I saw what we were making. I was like, okay, we can definitely afford this amount in rent per month. And once this place came along and they were like 6 months, I was like, we can't pass this up. This is right here. Like, this is the perfect location. Right off like 9. Like, everyone can come right here. It's perfect. So it ended up working that way. And it was lucky that we were able to find this place.
How did you find it?
We knew another trainer that brought it to like our attention. But a year before that, one of the girls that I still coach to this day, and this is like 4 years ago, her dad was telling us how there was like a baseball company that was here, and I was trying to get in touch with the owners because I knew that there was nothing here anymore. Couldn't get in touch with them, but a year later comes in with another trainer, and he's like, I knew these people that were trying to find someone to get in this place, and we were able to get in like a meeting and meet them. And like I said, like, it didn't work out the first thing, but I was very persistent, went after him, and I was like, no, I want this place. I'm serious.
So it was all word of mouth, basically. Like you just kept putting it out there, like, hey, I need a facility. I'm looking, and then eventually it just happened.
And also I had to talk to one of my friends to put in a word with this guy that knows him too. So like I was just very persistent, trying to push everything I could in my favor for it to happen.
There's a common theme here. Persistence.
Impatience.
Like, yeah. Well, no, I mean, honestly, in sales, we always say it's all about the follow-up, right? Yep. Like the fortune's in the follow-up. You got to follow up. And I mean, you're like a living testament to that. You just got to basically, keep going after what you want. Yep. And until they do, if you're trying to sell them something, they got to buy. If you're trying to get them to sign your lease so that you can rent the facility or that coach, like, I feel like that's a story that you hear with like, whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's with athletes, like it's always like just consistently being as persistent as possible. Oh, yeah. Like you hear stories of people that are like cold calling or emailing coaches to get a tryout, and like you just said, and then a year later you're on the team. It's like you just don't know what's gonna happen.
I think the thing is people got to get used to hearing no. Like people take no as like a bad thing, but you're one more answer closer to a yes. Like I just kept going. Didn't matter how many no's I was getting, and still to this day I don't care. Like you could tell me no, but eventually I'm gonna get closer to that yes. How
much of the coaching that you do, like obviously you do all the training, right? It's skills training, things like that. Do you do a lot of coaching on like that type of stuff? Like, hey, this is how you got to get in that right mentality of like, you're going to hear no, you're going to fail, you're going to lose. Like, how are you going to respond to that?
Especially, I know the kids that need to hear it, because like everyone's different. Like I have to coach one kid, his personality is different than this girl's personality, and their ages are different. So you kind of have to like play to that. But I know the kids that need to hear it, especially the kids going to college, or the kids that like want to play professionally, or the kids that are going to tryouts and stuff. Like I try to, like, as we're training, I try to like put in like my mentality, and like it's hard. Like a lot of the parents like, how do I make my kid more aggressive? And I'm sure you played hockey, you understand it. Like I can't give someone that fire, but like I try to like instill like the values I had that made me get it in them. And some of the kids it sticks, and some of the other kids it doesn't. I give all the kids a good one though. I always ask like, who's your favorite professional soccer player? When they're like training, I let them like do whatever they're doing, and then they do it, and it's like slow or whatever. And I go, who's your favorite professional soccer player? And they say whoever. And I go, imagine they're sitting over in the corner right there watching you train. How would you train? Would you train the same way you're training right now? And they always say no. And all of a sudden something clicks in their head, and now they're training really hard. Right. And I'm like, why does it take me to say that to you? It should be like that all the time.
You realize you have another level, and it's interesting. I feel like a lot of kids, and a lot of people in general, right? Whether it's business, whether it's, athletics, I feel like there's a lot of parallels between athletics and business. And we talk about this, Blake and I have talked about this before. Like we see it in real estate. Like a lot of the successful salespeople were athletes before they got into sales. And a lot of it's the same exact types of principles. But I feel like so much of people's success or failure it's like you said, aggressive. And it's almost like that aggressiveness comes from like a belief in yourself. Like you'll be aggressive if you think you're good enough. You know what I mean? But if you don't think you're good enough, you don't want to be aggressive, because if you're aggressive and they give you that opportunity, you may find out that you're not good enough. And then you're exposed to the fact that maybe you're not as good as, you think you are. And so then you don't want to pursue that thing. It's almost like you become like you stop yourself from going that extra mile to be successful and put in that extra work.
Well, I also think that people don't realize that they have more to give. Like there's always more. And I think that people like limit themselves. They don't realize how far you can go. Like I had that interview with Joe, and I told him like there was a quote that I live my life by. It's Will Smith, the most commonly traveled road, or being realistic is the most commonly traveled road to mediocrity. Like if I was realistic, I would have never played professional soccer. I played rec soccer till I was in 8th grade. I had no business playing in the MLS. I had no business playing professionally at all. Like nobody thought that was going to happen, but I wasn't realistic. I knew like what I wanted, and I was just going to push myself to get it.
Yeah. And if you'll never get what you don't ask for.
Exactly.
Right. So, and I just, it's amazing, because I feel like there's just so many parallels across life in general, whether it's in your relationships, your business, sports. Like the principles to all of those different, to be successful, are the same, and I think it's just like for me, I always tell like my like mindset is like, I just want to reach my fullest potential, right? Like see how far you could go, like how far you could take something, right? And the only way to do that is to you know, exasperate every possible scenario, try every single thing, every single outcome. And then if it doesn't work out, at least you know you tried.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But to want something and not even go after it, like that's terrible, you know, because you're not even giving yourself the opportunity to enjoy that success or to even try and get to that successful level.
Yeah, I think people are just too modest with what they want in life. Like you get one life. Why would you not try to do everything you possibly can?
Right. I remember, I forget who said it, but I don't know if I was reading a book or listening to a podcast, but they were like, imagine at the end of your life, right? And this is not like a religious thing, but like you die, right? And you go and you see God at the heavenly gates or whatever religion that you are. And they're like, oh, you kind of like get like a highlight reel of your entire life. And it's like, this is your life, right? Like, and then they're like, well, this is what your life could have been. And like, you get to see all of the things that you could have done, all of the, you know, basically you could have seen who you really could have been, like what your full potential was. And you didn't even try to do that. And it's like, imagine if that's how it went, how heartbreaking that would be. To be like, I could have had these things. I could have had these experiences, met these people, done these things. And I didn't just because I didn't try.
I think people want to be comfortable in life. They don't want to be uncomfortable. Like it's uncomfortable to do tough things. And like, not a lot of people want to go out of their comfort zone. I remember I enjoyed when I used to have to go play for new teams because I used to meet new people. I'd have to be in a new environment. Like I can go anywhere in America and I can go stay with somebody because I met so many people all over the place. But like if I stayed in my comfort zone, I would have stayed here in Ossining and I never been able to opportunity to go anywhere else.
Yeah, and you just live the same type of.
It's mundane. Like I don't want to live a mundane life. I want to get up and be excited about what I'm doing.
Yeah, and I mean, even like you go to a party and it's like there's always those people that are like super interesting that have had all those life experiences, and those are the people that you want to talk to and you hear about those things. And it's like, instead of hearing about it, why don't you go live it? Yeah. Right? Like go try that thing that you wanted to try. Do that. And you talk to people who are older and they put things off their entire life and they say, oh, I wish I could have done this. I wish I could have done that. And it's like, everybody knows that, but they still don't go out and actually take the initiative to go do that thing that they want to do.
Yeah, 100%. I believe it. I saw too many kids that I knew were maybe even better than me that didn't put themselves out there and could have gone farther.
Yeah, it's true. And that's what makes, like, when you do see those super successful people, you know, like who, for example, like someone like a LeBron James in basketball, right? Who at the very young age were like, oh, they're going to be the best. And then they actually do live up to that standard. It's like, okay, that's like a pretty amazing thing because it's almost impossible. You never see that. How many people were hyped up to be the best, you know, baseball player, hockey player, soccer player, basketball player, and they never live up to their potential?
I think that's the tough thing is when you're like tipped to do that so young, all of a sudden you hit a no and it's over.
Yeah.
But then if you're not, when you're young, you hear so many no's your whole life.
You have a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah, it doesn't matter anymore. You can keep going. It doesn't matter if you tell me I'm not good enough. I'll show you you're wrong.
Right. Yeah, you have to have that chip on your shoulder. Otherwise, you don't have that edge.
Yeah.
You don't have that fire, like you said, to go and show up at the person's house and knock on the door and be like, no, you're going to rent me your facility. Like, I need it.
Yeah.
So you finish, you start your business. Why buy houses? Like, what made you decide, like, hey, now's the time to go out and buy rental property?
So during COVID, obviously, we couldn't really do it a lot. And I was just researching. I was on YouTube every day. I was buying as many books as possible. I was reading everything I could. I literally made my own lease from like, I took like 10 different leases and started picking out each like of my favorite parts of the leases and created my own lease. And I still use it to this day. But I understood everything, like the addendums, like all this, how it worked to like rent, how like loans worked. But honestly, I could have read and done so much. You only really learn from doing it. So I remember we went out and like looked at a couple houses at first, and I had left. I went back to like OKC for a little bit, and I came back, but I was like,
I'll never forget. We were like, we started looking at houses, and then like we were out in the car driving around, and you're like, oh, by the way, I got to go play soccer out in OKC. I'm like, however many months it was. I was like, all right, cool. See you in like 6 months.
But literally when I got back, I remember we went and started searching again, and then I knew I wasn't showing enough income, so I had to get creative a little bit with my financing.
Partnered up with your sister.
Yeah, I got my sister involved, talked to her about it and how it could help her and like benefit her as well. And then I knew I had enough like capital and like that I was comfortable to do it. But I remember the hardest thing was to give that down payment. It was the smallest down payment I've given to this like day, but I remember it was the hardest check to handle.
You wish everyone could be like that now.
But yeah, so I kind of knew that like, even coaching, like I can't coach forever. I wish I could, but like it takes a toll on my body. When I'm here in the summer, I do the summer camps. I look at my watch at the end of the day, I coach it for 10 hours. It's 14 miles. I can't do that
every single day.
Yeah, I can't do it all the time. Like it's eventually I'm not gonna be able to. So I knew one way out was real estate. And I knew that I needed to get involved in it somehow, whether it was owning some multifamilies or whatever it was. Like that's what the route I wanted to go to though. I researched so much stuff. I knew I wanted to do multifamily.
I was just going to ask you, like, what made you decide to go, hey, multifamily rentals instead of house flipping or wholesaling or any of those other things?
That all seemed like really, I guess, a little scary because I was so new. I had no one was in my corner. I didn't know anybody. You were the first person I met involved in real estate. Like I didn't know anyone before that. I didn't know any electricians, nobody. And I knew that like my mom and dad had a house and it was a 2-family, but we used it as a 1-family. And I kind of understood it. And it started like pique my interest when I was reading more about like multifamilies and how you could make money on it. People were going to pay your mortgage for you. And you could also make rent on top of it. And I was like, wait, what? You can do that? And that got me like interested. I was like, I need to figure out how to do that.
Yeah. No, it is. I mean, it makes sense. I always say like the rental properties are like the passive thing, right? So it makes sense that you're looking to diversify your income, right? So you have real estate, you have the training business, like being a flipper or a wholesaler, that's active, right? Like that's very similar, honestly, to what I do. It's like you're in sales, essentially. Like if you don't have a house to flip, if you don't have a house to wholesale, like you're not making any money. Whereas with rental property, you have income every single month. They're going to pay their rent. They have to, they need a place to live, and you don't have to be there every single day. Although you learned about all of the effort that goes in. So obviously you did what we would call forcing appreciation, which is you bought something that needed a ton of work.
Yep.
You went in, you did all the work. You did the work yourself on a lot of the properties you've bought. Like, you want to talk about doing what it takes to be successful. I remember you'd be like training and coaching until like 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then you'd be up at your property at 2 o'clock in the morning, painting and renovating. Like, what was that like to be doing all of that? At one point you passed out from exhaustion, right?
So I had bought the first house and I had never used a drill in my entire life before I bought that house. That was the first house I learned how to use a drill.
So this is a testament to everybody who says that they
you can figure it out.
They don't know how. Well, you can figure it out.
YouTube. I learned everything there. And my first house, like I know I did so much like wrong. Like I did a lot of things the wrong way, but I learned from it. Like now I know not to do that. I know that there's things that I'll do myself, but I also know things that I'll pay for. And honestly, I don't want to do any of the work anymore. It's a lot. Like, but that first house, I wanted to teach myself a lot. Say I know what this is worth. I know how to do this. I know how it's supposed to be done.
So you don't get taken advantage of.
Exactly. Because if I didn't, someone goes, all right, this is going to be $15,000 to redo this kitchen. I'd be like, I don't think so. Like, I know I can do that for a lot cheaper. I know what cabinets cost. I know what flooring costs. Like, I know how to do the plumbing, like the electrical. Like, I know all that stuff. Like, it's not $15,000. So that first house, I did all the work myself. And honestly, it made me feel better at the end of the day because I knew how much effort I put into it. And it was like my own thing. Like I created all of that stuff. Like there was some things I couldn't do, like the flooring, the electrical stuff like that. But everything else, like I did myself. I found the tenants, like I did everything. Like I was so like hands-on that like I couldn't have learned more. It was the best like learning experience I ever had in my life.
You haven't been a landlord until you're in a kitchen or a apartment at 11 o'clock at night by yourself painting on like a random Wednesday night. I feel like every person I've talked to who owns multiple investment properties has done that. And that's because that's what it takes to get, to be successful. And then people, they underestimate how much work it really is.
Oh yeah.
Because there's a lot that goes into it that you don't see.
Oh yeah. I think my first property was the least amount of work. It was a lot of cosmetic stuff. So it was easier for me to start to do that stuff because it was, I wouldn't say lipstick on a pig, but for the most case, like I wasn't doing skilled work at all. Like I was able to look on YouTube and learn how to do painting on tiles and removing floors and whatever else I needed to do. But as I got more houses, so my second house, there was a little bit more that I couldn't do. I couldn't redo bathrooms. I didn't know how to do that stuff. So I had a contractor doing that stuff. I had to redo an attic. Like we talked about today, there was an attic and I do all the demos. So that's easy for me. I don't care about that stuff. But I can't sheetrock and tape and do all that stuff, nor do I want to. Like that stuff's not fun, the sanding, all that. So I started like contracting that stuff out. Then I bought my third house in Ossining and I just did the demo and that was it. I didn't do anything else.
And that's the one that you probably did the most amount of work.
Yeah, definitely.
how did you find, so when you started to stop doing the work yourself, like how did you, because I know a lot of people are like, well, I don't know contractors, I don't know electricians, plumbers. How did you find them?
Instagram was my best friend. Like I would just post everything and people were so invested in what I was doing. And I would just post like,
I was going to ask you about that.
Do you know an electrician? And people would just be like, I know this guy, this guy, this guy. And I'd have people come and some people would stick, some people wouldn't. And there's still guys that I use to this day when I got the first house that I'll still use for the rest of my life because I know like the quality.
You can trust them.
Yeah, exactly. And then
they're reliable.
They're not going to take advantage of me. I know they're going to be there when they say they're going to be there. Those are guys I can always trust that I know that are good.
So you said two things, because it's funny, like we met through an Instagram DM.
Yep.
So that's how you met your realtor, right? And it's like, people don't understand the power of like social media for the networking and like just reaching out to people. But you mentioned that you like documented the entire renovation process, like from A to Z on all of your properties. What made you decide to do that? Because, and I will say, you're very good with your coaching business as well on always documenting and putting out a ton of like social media content. Like, was that an intentional thing, or were you just like, oh, this is a good idea, like, let's see?
I think I had seen other people do it, but I also knew it'd be like interesting for me to also look back on it. And
so you really just like had like a digital journal of like, this is the journey.
But then people started to like really get invested in it. I was asking people questions. I have 50 people responding to the question, like, what should I do with these like cabinets or whatever? And I'd have 50 people with different colors and answers. And
I remember at one point you had a poll of what color you should paint the wall in the bedroom or something like that.
Like I had like 150 responses, and it was like, these people are actually invested. So I did on my second house, same exact thing. And then my third house, like people went crazy because that was the least amount of work I did, but the nicest a house had come out.
Oh yeah, that house is sick.
Yeah,
that house is wild. So it's just interesting because I think, you know, a lot of what we talk about now is like branding, right? Like having a brand and like knowing, like being intentional about it. Because whether you realize it or not, like you have a brand, right? It's like if you say someone's name, you think of something about them, right? And this is true with businesses, it's true with people, it's true with sports teams, all of this. And that's really in my mind when I think of branding, it's like, what do people think about when they think of you? And you're going to have that no matter what. So you can either control it and be intentional about it, or you can kind of like let people have their own opinion of it based on just whatever they come up with. And you kind of took the initiative to control that with your coaching business. And then like the documenting of the renovation process, it's like educational, but it's also just cool to see, like for someone who doesn't know what it looks like on the other side of sheetrock, or like what goes into gutting a bathroom, or what goes into hanging recessed lighting.
I'll say one thing, I didn't put everything on it. Like I didn't put like the tenant like interactions and stuff. And like
that's a whole, you could write a book about that.
That was the hardest part of it all. But I think with me, like how I talked about, I'm impatient and I'm also like, I'll persevere and stuff. I'll say the biggest mistake I made was buying 3 houses in 1 year with all my own money. Like I should have definitely partnered with people. Like that was the biggest problem, because I think we talk about you're asset rich, but you're cash poor. And like, it got to a point where it's like, I don't know how I'm going to afford any of this stuff anymore. Like there was too much money that I put in all 3 of my houses. I think it was literally 14 months. I had got 3 multifamily houses. And I think that's one thing a little piece of advice. If you're going to use all your own money, slow down.
Yeah. Well, sometimes like, you know, you want to scale and you want to scale quickly, but you have to be like, it's hard because when you're in investing, you want to find the happy medium between scaling, growing, and profit. And also like not being, you know, you have to have some, like you have to be conservative as well. Like you don't want to over leverage yourself and end up in a situation where you are like super stressed. But I mean, so basically you went from not knowing anything, not, you know, knowing how to use a drill or anything like that, just reading online, to buying 3 houses in a year.
I'll say that first rent check hit on that first house, and I was like, okay, I'm doing this. I'm gonna go, where's the next one? I remember I called.
You're like, I want 10 of these.
Yeah, I was like, how do I get another one? How do I do it again?
And honestly, you're not the only one. Like that happens more times than not. Like I'll meet with someone who's like, I really want to get into real estate investing. I've had people who, a lot of the time, there's a couple of misconceptions, right? Like number one, a lot of people think that they're not ready to buy when they are. Right? Like I always say, there's 3 big things. There's the amount of assets you have, which is your cash, your credit, and your income. Like if those are the 3 pillars of buying a home, right? And so you need to have either really strong 2 of those 3 or all 3, or you got to get creative with how you do it, whether it be through partnering or finding creative ways to kind of go out and buy. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they can buy even when they are ready. And they think, oh, it's going to be 18 months, 24 months, 3 years before I buy a house. And in that same amount of time, they end up with 2 or 3 houses over 24 months. And usually what happens is you buy that first one and you're like, how the heck can I buy that next one?
Oh, I get it. Yeah.
And you can start to get creative because you don't know what you don't know. So once you own a place, you kind of see how it works and you see how the process works. And then you have a knowledge base to go and find someone who's interested in partner with them or try and find sellers. I have a client right now who's buying a house. When he bought his last house, he was at the closing and he was just like, you know what, let me just mention it to the attorneys. Like, hey, by the way, if you know anybody, if you want to have any houses or if you know of anybody who's looking to sell houses, like, let me know because I'm going to be wanting to buy again. And the attorney was like, I actually just sold my last house, but I have a client who was like talking about selling. Here's his phone number. And he called him for 6 months straight, didn't hear from him. And then 6 months later, out of the blue, the guy called him and he's buying the house. So it's like you start to get creative with like, okay, how can I find that next deal? How can I work that next deal?
Think about the last house that I got. I remember we went there, we put the offer in, it got accepted. We didn't hear from them. They weren't even responding to you. And I walked into like you
literally went to the broker's office.
Walked in his office.
And was like, what the hell is going on?
Because I remember I called him and I was like, just like
playing dumb.
Yeah, I was like, hey, is this house still available? And he said, yeah. And I go, okay. And I hung up. I walk into his office and I'm like, what's going on? Like, I'm the one that put the offer, you accepted. And all of a sudden things started to move real fast after that.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, not everybody deals honestly and deals, transparently. And that happens, especially with commercial and investment real estate. Like, it's a very different game than like going out and buying a single family home or an apartment to live in. It's a much more emotional process. People are like, oh, I'm going to live here with my family. I need, the priorities when you're buying an investment versus when you're buying a place for your family to live are two completely different avenues. And what that means is the processes a lot of the time work completely differently because the psychological thought process of the transaction is different. So what ends up happening is, unfortunately, you get, people who try and take advantage of that. And so sometimes, you have to be persistent and like keep following up and keep trying. Cause I always say the best deals are the hardest to get, right? Like in terms of if that property, like we look back on that now and that's probably the best deal you've bought, right? But it was also the biggest pain in the ass to get to the closing table.
Well, my loan changed 3 times in like a week.
Right. Exactly. And that was at the end of the process, once you already had the deal and we were getting ready to close. But just to get the damn thing in contract was such a battle. And that's my point. Like, if it was easy and seamless, who knows how many deals they had fall through because the buyers weren't persistent because they didn't keep following up. And that's what ends up happening. So like a lot of the time people will be like complaining about how difficult it is to get to the closing table. And I'm like, yeah, but you have to understand something. That's why you're getting such a good deal. If this was so clean cut and so easy and smooth, then it would just, anybody would have bought it by now and you wouldn't be getting it for 10, 15, 20% less than what it should have been. And that's why you're going to get the deal. It's like anything else in business. You're paid to the extent that you solve problems, right? Like for your coaching business, you solve the problem of helping these kids get better at soccer, right? Like, and the better they get, the more you help them get better, the more financially compensated you get. In real estate, like as agents, we're paid to the number of deals we close, which is a result of how many people's problem we can solve. Somebody has a house that they need to sell. Somebody has a house that they need to buy. Some of them are more complicated than others. And how good you are at solving that problem is going to determine whether or not you close the deal. And in investment real estate, it's the same exact thing. Like if someone is in a bad situation, they're upside down on their house, can you turn that into a good deal by helping them get out of that situation and solving that problem, or getting that good deal to the closing table because you're able to take on the difficult tenants who aren't paying rent for 6 months. A lot of people wouldn't even touch that. So the person who is willing to touch that, or the person who's willing to go to the house at 2:00 in the morning and renovate it, is the one who's going to get paid for that. You know what I mean? And you have to sometimes appreciate like the reason that the deal is as good as it is because of all the problems that you have to deal with. It's part of the process.
I think that's the one thing I learned is, like you said, like it's how many problems can you solve? I had to fix so many things, first house, second house, even the third house. But like you said, my third house was my best deal. And if I didn't go through with it, like it ended up being 2 parcels. Like we didn't expect that until the end. Like we were like, is this even included in the sale? And all of a sudden it is, and you can subdivide it and whatever. But like,
and you also had a creative vision. Like you looked at not what it was today, but what it could be. Like your last house had these gorgeous river views that you couldn't see. You didn't even know they were there, but you had the vision to like, let's get rid of these trees. Let's open it up. Let's design the entire house around this view. And now you've got like one of the few houses in the area with these incredible Hudson River views that add a couple $100,000 in value to your house that nobody even would have realized.
I remember when I was like so excited about it, I took a video and I showed my mom and like my sister and my girlfriend. They were all like, no, what are you doing? Like, do not buy this house. I was like, just trust me, believe me. And now they're like, wow. I actually had my parents move into the downstairs apartment and it was like super nice for them. They loved it. And they're like, they couldn't believe what I knew what I could do to it. Cause I had already done a little bit. Like I got into, so I really got into all of this. I used to watch HGTV all the time. Like every
single day. You didn't want to admit it in the beginning.
Every single day I used to watch HGTV. I forget the wife and the husband,
the flippers in California.
Yeah,
I think Heather and Tarek El Moussa were the ones who...
Them, but then there's the other ones too that have their
Chip
own...
and Joanna?
Yes. I used to watch them all the time and that's how I got like interior design stuff from. So like I was watching them like religiously 3-4 hours a day during COVID. And that's how I was like, I know I can design things really good now. I don't have like a degree or anything but I saw her do it. I know I can do it.
Well, I mean, let's see. So you learned from HGTV and YouTube.
And books.
It's all self-taught.
Yeah.
Yeah, because like you said, you didn't have anybody in real estate, so you learned.
And the problem is my dad's friend was into it, and I used to ask my dad about it. And we also have a multifamily, so we used to rent the upstairs, but my dad always was so negative about it. He's like, no, you don't want to deal with tenants, blah, blah, blah. I remember before that we closed on the first house, I remember we told my dad, I was like, oh, we got our offer accepted, like we're going to get it. And he's like, you sure you want to do that? And like, this is my whole life though. People be like, you sure you want to do that? You sure you want to drop out of college? And I knew what I wanted. I knew I was going to do it. I don't care about your idea of it. When we talked about like, I'm not living somebody else's life.
You're like, I'm telling you
how I'm going to live my
life.
What
I'm going to do. I'm not asking for your permission to do it.
I don't want to look back and be like, I should have done that, because that would have been the biggest one. I should have done that. If we look back now, I had a 2% interest rate and I bought a 2-family for $195,000. You're never going to see that again in my entire life, ever, anyone's life.
It's true. And you know, you touch on a very interesting thing. I was literally just talking to a friend of mine the other day about, he was saying like, you've got to be careful who you tell or ask for advice. Like you got to tell, you know, like if you go to someone, like for example, you say, I'm going to start this coaching business. You go and ask the wrong person for their advice, and all of a sudden they talk you out of it, and you don't have this, you know, super successful business. Or you say, I want to buy this house, and your family talks you out of it. And now in retrospect, they're like, Mike, that was such a great idea. Like, you know, you were so right. But like, had you listened to them, you wouldn't have bought your best deal.
Yeah. 100%.
And you have to be conscientious of like who you ask for advice and who you talk to, because if they do get to you and they talk you out of it, and honestly, you're the exception. Most people, if they say, I'm going to go start a business, that's scary. Like you might fail. And so people try and talk you out of it and tell you it's a bad idea. And if you listen to them, you'll never get that.
I think you need to ask the right people though.
Yeah,
ask
100%.
the people that have done it. And
exactly.
Like, you know, I was asking people that hadn't never done it, and only had heard from other people. So like maybe they had a bad experience.
The horror stories.
Yeah. But like that's not the case. And listen, I had horror stories. Like
everybody does.
And I said I was never going to get involved again, and literally went and looked at houses again today. Somehow 6 months later.
It's true, because it's an emotional roller coaster, right? You're dealing with tenants, you're dealing with renovations, problems happen. Yep. It's all about the expectation, right? If you go into something and this is, you expect it to be all sunshine and rainbows, and then the next thing you know, you're getting harassed by a tenant who's upset with you at 2:00 in the morning, yep. Or you're dealing with, a flooded basement, or you're dealing, whatever the case may be, it's not what you expected. But if you go into it knowing like there's going to be problems, I gotta, be ready for these issues, it kind of determines the mindset that you're in when that problem comes about.
I still think though, like you might be in that mindset, but until it really happens,
you don't know.
Yeah. So like on my first house, my sewer line collapsed. I wasn't ready for that. My basement was flooded with like sewage. I wasn't ready for that. The boiler went. I had my second house, a horrible tenant, like 6 police reports from the upstairs tenant on her.
Fighting with the other tenant.
Oh my God, it was insane. I remember she had a stop work order put on my house and there was no work being done.
Well, no, that was the best story ever. So she blew out the circuit with her electric fireplace.
And that, I was literally about to come up 4 hours later and turn the heat on that day. It was the heating season was about to start that day.
So she blew out the panel with her plug-in fireplace. And then when you had an electrician come to fix it for her, she called the building department and said that you were doing illegal electrical work to fix the thing that she created.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And also, she called the fire department that day and had the fire department at my house.
And the fire department was like, why are you calling
what do you want me to do? Yeah, that was a tough one. And I remember when she drove me insane and I needed to sell the house. I remember nobody would buy the house until they were out. And that was the hardest thing to do.
I think I'm going to do like a podcast episode. We'll get like 5 or 6 landlords together and just tell horror stories about, what goes on with these things. Because honestly, people don't know. And, we laugh about it and we joke about it, but there's a lot of people out there that don't understand what people go through.
Oh, yeah.
And they think of these landlords and investors as like these super rich, they think of like a BlackRock or, a State Street, like these big hedge funds that are buying up these houses and pushing these people out. When the majority of landlords are just like small mom and pop, single guy, like just owning a property by himself and just trying to make ends meet. Like you're just trying to set up a better future for you and your family by buying this house and making not a lot of money, just a little bit of money every, month, and just trying to build a future for yourself.
It's tough. I mean, there's no story I ever read or like could have handled me for the stress that was involved in it. Like dealing with people is the most difficult thing to do because they're so, you just don't know what you're going to get. Like I thought that they're people, volatile. Yeah, I thought these people were really nice. They showed really well. Guy had a great job. Problem was I didn't really meet her. So that's how I didn't like really understand that situation. But once that happens, it's tough.
Well, it's also tough because like at the end of the day, they paid their rent.
Yeah,
and then
there was nothing I could do.
There's nothing you can do about that. But there's nothing that protects the landlord from the person who just wants to harass you because they had nothing better to do, quite frankly.
Well, I think the worst thing for me was seeing their name pop up on my phone. I knew it was something horrible.
In your stomach that you would have.
God. I remember when that thing blew, I was coaching at like 8 a.m. and she calls me and I can't answer my phone. She's like, you need to get up here in 30 minutes or I'm calling the police. I was like, what do you want me to do in 30 minutes? Get up there in 30 minutes and turn your thing on. Like, I'll be up there at 12.
And that's an unrealistic expectation. Yeah. It's honestly not fair. But most people aren't like that.
Yeah.
But for every 100 people, there's going to be that one person. And if that's your tenant, then they're going to harass you. And you don't know that. And that's, out of everybody that I've talked to, yeah, you hear stories, but that was probably, I hate to say it, but one of the worst.
And what's crazy is I vet people really well. Like
you have to.
I do it so well. And then somehow this one happened where I didn't expect it. And it was probably the biggest stress. I'm not going to lie. I cried a couple of times about this house.
I think everybody's been there.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of people who are going to listen to this and be like, yep.
Yeah, I've been there.
I've been there. I know how that's like, but you do make a good point that you said earlier about when you go out, whether you're investing in real estate, starting your own business, like you have to look at what someone has. And if they have what you want, that's the person that you want to ask for advice. If they don't, like, that'd be like me coming to you and be like, Mike, can you give me tennis lessons?
Yeah. Not realistic. Can't do that.
That's not what you're good at. You're good at soccer. Like you're good at coaching in that aspect. So like I should probably ask you for soccer lessons. But it's the same exact thing in business. It's the same exact thing in marketing and sales. Like if someone doesn't have what you want, they may love you, they may care about you. And a lot of the time that's why they're so adamant about trying to protect you. But it's not necessarily, that doesn't make it good advice. Good intentions and good advice are two completely different things.
Yeah, you can only get good advice from someone who's been there and done that. If they haven't done any of it, how can they give you any advice on it?
Exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. So what's next? You're back out. We were looking at property earlier today.
But it's really expensive now, so.
Yep. Interest rates are significantly higher. The good old days of 2.5%, 3.5%.
But the thing is now I don't have, like I sold 2 of my houses. I don't think we said that before, but I sold 2. So like I feel a lot more confident now. I don't feel so stressed all the time. So like if I were to get back into something, it's not as scary anymore. Like I remember I was very strapped, but I didn't care. I was like, once I'm on something, I'm on something. I knew like I wanted, like I'm very competitive. So like once I got out of soccer, I needed to go to something else. And somehow I got into real estate and I started just buying and buying and buying. But now I understand I'm a little bit older and more mature. Now I understand that it's a little bit slower of a process with this.
It is. And that's the thing that I talk about with so many landlords. It's like, it's not a time the market perfectly and hit a home run every single time. It's a slow accumulation over the next 20, 30, 40 years. Right? Like if you're looking to buy multifamily property or a rental property, you're looking to try and get, if you want 1, you probably want to buy 2. If you want 2, you probably want to buy 3. Maybe you don't want 100, but maybe you want 4 or 5. And so that's going to take time to build to, and it's better to get the right deal and take your time doing it. And you want to be aggressive and try and find the right deal. But again, it's that healthy medium, and it's funny because it's like you said, like once you have your mindset on something, well, it's I see that with everybody. And I'm just laughing when you said that, because it was like, you were like 6 months ago, I'm done. I'm good. I don't want to do this. And then obviously you've been thinking about it. And then we talked the other day and you were like, and oh, by the way, what do you think of this? And you like sent over like 4 properties.
Don't tell my fiance. She doesn't know anything about this.
Talking about it on a podcast probably isn't the best.
She's the one that heard it the most about all these houses. She was the one that heard everything.
Of course.
And that's why I think she has like a
negative connotation of it. Yeah, of course. And which is understandable. And everybody's going to have that, because when you're exposed to all the negative, then, that's what you're going to, what you're going to think about.
Yeah. But if someone were to ask my advice on it, I would say get involved in this. Like, you need to get involved. This is how you're going to get out of the rat race that everybody says.
Yeah. And that's also like going and talking to someone like you is how you can try. You're never going to be perfect at it, but you at least try to avoid some of the mistakes, right? Is so that you can say like, hey, this person made this. That's why you listen to the books, listen to the podcast, so that you can be like, hey, this person learned this the hard way and they're trying to tell me about it. I should probably listen to what they're saying.
Well, I used to religiously listen to, when I would walk my dogs, Bigger Pockets all the time. And I would just like envision myself buying the houses. But like, I did learn a lot from these people, like being, dealing with tenants, being creative with your financing, the upgrades that need to get made, and sometimes that don't need to get made, that aren't a big deal, because I think sometimes once you get into like multifamily, sometimes you think you like need to overly upgrade them,
overdevelop it,
but sometimes it's not in the right location to do it. And so like in Poughkeepsie, when I was over there, I think I had properties that I did correct. Like, I didn't need to overdo it, but now I've got a different one. And yeah, I live in one of the units, but I think that it's in the right spot to overdo it, where like you're going to get the return on it.
Right. You look at the intangibles, like we touched on. You have these amazing views. You're walking distance to the train. Like, you're right in the middle of town. Like, someone can come along and look at that and be like, I absolutely love this. It's unique. It's different. So you can go in with high-end finishes, luxurious finishes, and like really make it nice and make it special. Whereas in other places, you might put an extra 25 to 50,000 into a building that nobody's going to pay you for, and it's a completely different approach. And, Bigger Pockets and these big national platforms are great for the person that's getting in. The thing that's so hard is they don't get into the nuance of like the individual transaction or the individual deal or the individual market. Like, yeah, sure, it's great to know what's going on in Arizona or South Carolina, but it's not necessarily applicable to what's happening in Connecticut, New York, or New Jersey.
Or even upstate New York.
Right.
Upstate New York is completely different than
right. Like, what's happening in Manhattan versus Westchester versus Dutchess County versus Albany are completely different conversations. And yeah, sure, on the macro level, there's some similarities, and on the micro level, it's completely different. Even town to town, like some developments that's happening in Ossining versus Peekskill versus White Plains, like, it's all different. And the only way that you really learn about that is to get out, put your boots on the pavement, and go and see what's happening.
Well, I think that's one thing I learned too, is like even Poughkeepsie, street to street. It's not even just Poughkeepsie, it's every town. Like, this could be a great street. Maybe this isn't a great street, but I think the only way you really get a feel for things is by going to the house and seeing it. Like, I didn't know that until I started doing it. Like, you get a feel for the neighborhood. You're there at a different, maybe in the morning, afternoon, nighttime, see kind of like who's hanging out, what's going on, and like you get a better feel for all this stuff. And that's a huge determining factor of the type of tenants you're going to get to.
I mean, how much of our time when you were looking for your first, any of the houses, was spent us just getting in the car together, driving around. We'd go see maybe 3 or 4 houses, but we'd be together for 3 hours.
Yep.
And we'd be looking at all the different, the areas, the neighborhoods, like what development projects are happening a block or 2 over. Like, what are the demand factors? Oh, this one's a block from the new hospital. Like, that's going to help with rent. Or, this one's close to a college. Like, all of those things, you can look at it on a map, but it's not the same experience as going there and walking around, getting a feel for the area, seeing what that coffee shop that's going to be somebody's favorite place to go and do work because they work from home. Or those are the types of things that you can't quantify necessarily, but once you have experience, you can kind of recognize those indicators of like, hey, I've seen this before. I know what this looks like, and I think this is going to help out why this property is good or maybe why it's bad.
Yeah, well, I think it's even interesting today, like when we went to go look at the houses. I remember the first house, I would ask you everything, like, what do you think about here? And then today I was like, well, I think we could just put the washer dryer right there. And you're like, yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah. Like, I think you start to learn as you go, because you start to see it. It's just like you start to feel it too. Like, I know when I walk into a house, okay, this is how it should be laid out. You want the open concept, so people walk in, they're like, wow, like, I just know all that stuff now, but it wouldn't have happened if I didn't take that first step to try and start doing stuff.
Yeah, no, it's true. And it's cool to see like that transformation. And honestly, that's the best thing, is that now you can start to, that's why I do like the networking events and all of these different things, is because you start to learn from other people. Like, you learn things that I don't know about. You're teaching me things. I'm teaching you things. You bring different people into the mix, and then you can learn. You put everybody's minds together. all of them added up together is going to be far greater than one individual person. You know what I mean? You add everybody's shared experiences, and that's how, you know, everybody benefits from that. So it's really cool. But where can people find you? Social media, like how can people connect with you?
Yeah, so I have my personal Instagram, which is at Mike da Fonte, and I have my coaching Instagram, Fonte Pro Training. I also have a website for this, Fonte Pro Training, but if you want to follow in my real estate stuff, it's on my personal one.
Cool. Well, I'm glad that we got to do this, man. We'll definitely do it again.
Awesome.
Good seeing you.
Thanks.